Nerds, I'm talking about Star Trek Picard episode 305, Imposters. I'm going to review the episode and then get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Soul Show. I'm Nathan. I'm coming to you solo this week because I'm traveling for work and I had some difficulty coordinating with my colleagues. So this episode is written by Cindy Appel and Chris Derrick and directed by Dan Liu. The spoiler-free logline of the episode is caught by Starfleet and facing a court-martial. Paranoia grows as Picard struggles to uncover whether a prodigal crewman from his past has returned as an ally or an enemy, hell-bent on destroying them all. So this is my favorite episode of the season so far. If you've seen some of our previous reviews, have seen 6 episodes. I've watched this episode a month ago now. I cried a month ago when I saw it. I cried when I watched it again shortly after that. I cried when I watched this episode 5 days ago, and about 15 minutes ago as I was preparing to record this, and I'm recording this the Wednesday before it drops for everyone else, I cried again. It's a really great episode. Some people have, as I was looking on the internet today, surmised who shows up as the prodigal crew member. I won't spoil that here. I'll talk about it when I get into the spoiler section of the video. It was a very satisfying episode. Everyone is doing a really great job in this episode. After Worf and Raffi were put to the side in the previous episode, we get them back in this episode and we get a little bit more progression of their investigation, but the real part of this episode is on the ship with the prodigal crew member and some really great scenes between that crew member and Picard. So for me, under our rating system, this episode deserves a theater rental, which means that invite the neighborhood and show it. I remember several years ago I saw Measure of a Man in the theater, and I think this is worthy enough of the theater rental. Yeah, I really can't talk about this without actually talking about it. So without further ado, I'll just jump into it. But if you're enjoying the review, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. It makes the algorithm happy, helps other people find our videos. All right, with that, spoilers ahead. All right, so I have screenshots from the episode. So we start off with Jack having a hallucination here where he kills everyone on the bridge crew. He kills Forge, he kills Esmer, Mura, and Savine here on the bridge. And he's also still seeing these vines creep over everything. And he wakes up with a phaser in his hand. So he still doesn't know what's going on with him. And that's how the episode starts. The actual episode, not in his head, we get this meeting in the ready room where Shaw basically tells Picard that he already has informed Starfleet once Riker transfers the ship back over to him. And they are on their way. And he also reinstates Seven here as well when she asked to be reinstated. He also gives them a bit of time to get their, as he says, BS stories together. So we have this meeting with Jack and Beverly in the corridor here, and Picard says that he'll take all the blame and hopefully they can get back to their lives, and he wants to be part of their lives. He also suggests that Jack join Starfleet, but again, Jack, even after the ordeal they went through, and I thought he was actually warming to Picard after the end of the last episode, especially as they get out of the nebula and he started to remember what his father said in that bar. I thought he was starting to warm to the crew thing, but I guess you don't change overnight, so it'll take a little bit more of a development for him. Anyway, we get Raffi and Worf sparring here, which I guess is a foreshadowing for later on in the episode. And then Raffi and Worf hears back from Worf's handler that they have been denied access to Daystrom Station and told to find another way. And then the connection is broken. There's some back and forth here with Raffi and Worf, but about what they've sacrificed. And Worf says, "Don't presume to know what I've sacrificed." I assume that's going to come up again. It didn't really come up in this episode except for when they fight. So I assume it's going to come up later in the season. So we get a little bit of information about Daystrom Station, how it's heavily guarded and under an AI. And then there's a known associate here, Kryn, who happens to also know Brunt, just like Steve knew Brunt from DS9. So no image of this person at this point, and we don't know who it is. Of course, we find out later on in the episode. So they go back to District 7, and apparently everyone is afraid of them now because they cut the head off of Sneed, and Sneed was the top dog in District 7. So they've, as Worf said, upset the ecosystem there. So the Intrepid comes and they rendezvous with the Intrepid, and the Intrepid for some reason is sending over a shuttle. And we find out later on why that is when Picard speaks to our visitor. This whole ride in the Turbolift is also pretty funny because Riker is like, we have saved the galaxy several times. Shaw reminds them that they also hot dropped the saucer section of the Enterprise D on a planet that was in Star Trek Generations. They also, in Star Trek Insurrection, there was a violation of the Prime Directive, so Picard could snog a villager of Baku. And in the last episode of TNG, all good things. They wiped out all humanity. So as he said, it's like a chicken and egg thing with them. And they go down the corridor and we see Ro. This is the crew member, the surprise crew member that was alluded to in the spoiler-free description of this episode. If you don't know who Ro is, there's a little bit of an explanation in this episode through the conversation that Picard has with Riker. Ro was added to the crew after Wesley left in season 4. So she shows up in that 3rd episode of season 5 as almost the complete antithesis to Wesley. She was court-martialed because she disobeyed an order on an away mission leading to the deaths of several of her crew members, and she was imprisoned, and everyone hated her. Well, a lot of people hated her when she got on the ship, except for Guinan. So apparently she was famously court-martialed because her name was mentioned and Picard knew who she was immediately. So when the admiral who assigned her on the ship wanted her on the ship, he protested, and Riker also didn't like her. But over the course of the season, she had showed up 7 more times in various episodes, really memorable episodes. She had a contentious relationship with Riker until they warmed to each other as well. There was of course the great episode where they were de-aged. Ro, the captain, and Guinan were de-aged. There was the episode where Geordi and she were sent out of phase, but ultimately she ended up betraying Picard, which really hurt him because he was starting to groom her almost like a daughter. I guess he came to admire her almost like a daughter. So yeah, it was really great that they're closing the loop on that in this episode. All right, so they meet here and she's a commander, so it's Commander Ro Laren. And if you remember from TNG, last name is first and the first name is last. With Bajorans, I skipped over this on the bridge before the shuttle showed up. Picard asked Seven to do him a favor, which is basically just hide Jack. And unfortunately, we find out that for Jack's point of view, and here's Ro is saying that they're being charged with treason, possibly. For Jack's point of view, the dream that he had, being a Starfleet officer and shooting people, is starting to come true because Seven's solution is to have him hide in plain sight as an officer. And this is the dissection in the sickbay by Beverly and Dr. Oak. And LaForge is there, and she throws up at the sight of this changeling that looks like her, but also has a hole in its chest. And there's this back and forth, as I mentioned, with Riker, and Riker's trying to talk sense into him and trying to get him to calm down. He tells him that the Maquis aren't enemy of Starfleet anymore. It was 30 years ago, but Picard still feels betrayed by Ro, so he's not going to let it go nearly as easily. And Picard thinks that she should be locked up yet again, and he's wondering how she even got back into Starfleet. Ro, for her part, is being very cold. And Riker, even though more forgiving, is wondering why she's so cold here. And I guess we find that out later on in the episode. And then they start their dialogue back and forth. They're very icy dialogue back and forth. She cuts herself to show that she's not a changeling, but he still is very standoffish towards her and very cold towards her. Even mentions her earring here. So Jack has another hallucination. He goes to the transporter room. He sees these people turn into these red vines again. He's just flashing his red eyes. There's just I don't know what's going on with him. Like I said in our previous review, it's very similar to Geordi being taken in TNG, but maybe it's something else. He has another hallucination here where he kills the transporter chief, but it doesn't actually happen. We're back on Metalis Prime, and we find out who Kryn is. He happens to be a Vulcan. I actually looked this up, and there are definitely bad Vulcans in Star Trek history. There's Zakona, who was a gun runner on DS9. They tried to flirt with Quark. She was part of the Maquis. There's T'Pol, Vulcan female, that tried to get the Stone of Gaul because she was an isolationist. It was Valeris, who didn't trust the Klingons and the undiscovered country, so she was the protege of Spock, and she was part of the conspiracy to sabotage peace talks. There was Valatak, a Vulcan logic extremist who blew up Sarek's ship in Star Trek Discovery in the episode Lethe, and of course there were other Vulcan extremists as well, logic extremists as well, specifically blowing up the learning center and nearly killing Michael when she was a child. There's Admiral Patar in the second season of Discovery, who was also described by Admiral Cornwell as a logic extremist. But I gotta say that all of these people had ideological reasons for being bad. This guy just seems to be bad. He explains later on that you can't have a utopia without crime, ergo criminal enterprise is logical, but I don't like it. It's a little weird for a Vulcan to just be a criminal and then also be friends with a Ferengi as a logical person. So this guy is definitely a one-off. I could have also mentioned T'Pring and Sabak, but because of what they're doing them on Strange New Worlds. The jury's still out on whether or not they are bad, and I would actually say that given the characterization of T'Pring in the first season of Strange New Worlds, she's not bad. We'll see what drives her to who she becomes in the episode Amok Time from the TOS era. So the standoff with Kryn is interesting because he thinks he has the upper hand, and it does look like he has the upper hand here. He clocks that they have a mobile emitter and basically a hologram on Raffi. Of course, the mobile emitter is from Voyager. I guess it's standard issue now, or it's something that's standard within Starfleet, even though it's like future technology. I guess they were able to replicate it. I think Voyager, they said they couldn't replicate it, but anyway, we did see it last season on a hologram of Elnor as well. So then we're back here in the sickbay, and they find out that it takes dissection of the organs for it to go back into the gelatinous form or the original form. So there is some sort of evolution here of the changelings. So we had this conversation with Picard, and again, back and forth, very chilly, and then he gets a message from Beverly explaining that the changelings can pass the blood tests and capabilities beyond the superficial. So that cut to her hand makes him suspicious of her again as a changeling. And he starts to ask her questions about, why are you asking about my son? Why are you not asking about Vatic or the Shrike? So he's increasingly suspicious that she's a changeling, and she asks about the changeling body, and they're supposed to be going to the sick bay, and we see these two security officers looking for Jack, and she changes her mind and she decides to go to the holodeck. And again, Picard doesn't trust her, so he takes her off the safety protocol. I mentioned in the previous episode that a lot of the end credits are Easter eggs for future episodes. This is another one of the Easter eggs for the future episode. So you see the safety protocol taken off in the end credits of every episode since episode 1, which are interesting ways to lace Easter eggs. So he turns off the safety protocol and takes out a phaser. It says, "This is used to be Guinan. Do you remember Guinan?" Again, poking at her portrayal. Guinan is one of the only people who actually trusted her from the beginning. She didn't have to take time to like her. So yeah, so there's this back and forth between them, and this is actually when I started to cry in this episode. This is more like really good acting here. The back and forth where Rose says, you confuse morality for duty, and Picard says, "I trusted you," and Rose says, "Only when it was easy for you," and then Picard says, "You broke my heart," and she said, "You broke mine." And that's, like I said, this is when you start to cry in this episode, when they break down, and there's also this in the line here where Picard chides her for saying that she needed her Bajoran ring, and he found out that it was just her ego, and he says here, "Ego that would lead you to betray me." Apparently he's rehearsed this speech for 30 years. So yeah, this is a really good exchange. These two actors, Michelle Forbes and Patrick Stewart, are doing exceptional here in this back and forth, actually through the entire episode, really. So yeah, and this is where they actually figure out that they are who they say they are, because they were both hurt by each other, and she tells them that Starfleet is compromised. And then we cut to Act 3. Back on SLS Prime, Kryn makes Raffi and Worf fight to the death, or he'll kill both of them. And this again is where Worf mentions that he sacrificed much. Again, I hope that'll come up later on in the season. Maybe it's something to do with Alexander, maybe it's something else. I don't know. We'll see what that's about. Because I think Worf at some point was a captain in Starfleet, and then when we see him here, he's not. He was an ambassador at one point. Well, it was a different future. That was in the last episode of TNG. So maybe he was never ambassador, but like in some of the Star Trek books and things, he's a captain. So anyway, Raffi best him. I don't know if they figured out ahead of time or he dropped his guard because he knew he could survive this, but it fools Kryn enough. And this is where we figure out that these security officers are changelings, because they're talking in this weird changeling language that I guess has been developed for this show, because previously the way the changelings talk is by touching each other, but we've heard this clicking thing before, so we know that they're changelings. So there's a back and forth with Ro and Picard. She's explaining that there's several other ships that have changeling problems. She tried to go to people further up and Fleet Command, and she's always been blocked. She's been asked to investigate, and she's been blocked. She even tried to go to the press, and she's been blocked. So she thinks that all of Starfleet is compromised. This also says that she doesn't trust transporters. So maybe I think here, suggesting that maybe people are being changed or swapped out when they're transported. So that's why she took the shuttle over. She also mentions Frontier Day, and also that Jack, his name has come up several times, which is why she was asking about him earlier. So yeah, this whole exchange is really interesting, and I'm sure maybe we'll get some more elucidation of that later on. Here, Kryn thinks Worf is dead, but he is not. He thinks that he owns Raffi. He also threatens her ex-husband, her son, and also her granddaughter. But of course, Worf is not dead, and he says he's mastered the Kayla technique of making his heartbeat seem imperceptible, but he's also very injured and bleeding. Kryn explains here that the security system is run by AI that has a logical flaw. We're talking about AI here again. We had a whole season of AI as an issue in season 2 of Discovery, so hopefully that's not another thing here. We'll see. So this exchange with Ro. She wants them to run. And this is, again, now you start to cry even more when she says, I wish you knew me and I wish I knew you. When she starts to cry here, really great performance by Michelle Forbes here. And yeah, her crying makes me cry a bit here, but you really cry later on. And then she leaves to go back and of course leaves him with her earring, the earring that he mentioned several times though. He goes to the bridge and tries to get Shaw to leave, says that Starfleet is compromised, and Shaw calls for security. Of course, he doesn't believe her. Until Ro's sacrifice here. She has the bomb placed, the changelings transport off, and you definitely see the changelings now because they changed their appearance to crew members that are on the ship. The Intrepid stops answering, which verifies her suspicion that some high-ranking officers on the ship are in on this conspiracy and are changelings. So she calls the Titan, tells them about the situation, and she sees that it's too far. She's not going to be able to disarm it, and she decides to make a sacrifice here. I mean, this is again where I cried just less than an hour ago. The back and forth between her and Picard here, and him saying that I see you, it's really great. It's awful. It's really great. They do a great job there. And then Ro's gone, unfortunately, and Shaw is forced to make a decision here because they start to load torpedoes and try to say that what just happened was their fault, try to pin it on them. So he goes to red alert and they head out. Jack gets confronted by these changelings, 4 of them, and then he goes off. He sees the red door again here, he kills them all. And of course the red vines again he's seeing. So they are in red alert and they escape, but now they have to come together and figure out what to do. This exchange between Picard and Riker says, I knew what she meant to you, and he said, no, you didn't. Maybe I didn't even know. Like I said, I think she became somewhat of a surrogate daughter, and this whole season has been an exploration of legacy, I guess. We talked earlier in the season about how he had a bunch of surrogate sons, but this is his only surrogate daughter because he never had a real child until Jack showed up on the scene. So he had a lot of relationship with Eleanor or Wesley and Renee to a certain extent, but this was the only woman that was like a surrogate child to him. And so he felt really portrayed by her, which might have been too high of a standard, but I guess none of the other surrogate children portrayed him. So maybe it has nothing to do with gender. But yeah, he's hurt by this. And he shows that the earring, and that apparently is where her cache of information is. And then we see a connection coming in, and it is Worf. So this is how the two storylines get connected. And then here it's that sick bay. This is the last thing that we see. We have the conversation between Beverly and Jack, and Beverly asked him, how did you, first she notes that he hasn't been sleeping, and she says, it's really impressive that you were able to take out 4 of these people. How did you know that they were changelings? And he was like, I didn't know. I think something's very wrong with me. And that's where the episode ends. So yeah, it was, as I said, an exceptional episode, but I want to know what you guys think. So please comment down below, like, share, and subscribe, and check out our review from last week, or check out one of our reviews about The Mandalorian. Now,